Missing portions of grand jury transcripts, missing discovery, missing memos, missing this, missing that. What in the world is going on here? The massive hearing that we've been waiting for involving Trump's former personal lawyer, Lindsey Halligan, who became a federal prosecutor out of the Eastern District of Virginia. She was on the hot seat this past week, where there was a consolidated request for her disqualification in the James Comey criminal case by Comey and Comey's counsel and New York Attorney General Letitia James. They say that Lindsey Halligan was unlawfully appointed as an interim United States attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. So the hearing was to address the appointment clause constitutional issue, but there were additional issues that ended up being raised. In one specifically interesting moment, the judge, federal Judge Curry, asked the prosecutors and asked the defense, hey, I've heard there was a memo from the prior United States attorney who was fired or pushed out by Donald Trump, a Republican, by the way, saying that there was no evidence to do these prosecutions against Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. What's called a declination memo, declining to prosecute. And then Trump fired or pushed out that United States interim attorney. And then the defense counsel said, nope, Judge, we did not get that yet. And the prosecutor said, oh, we will see, we'll see. And the defense said, I guess we'll get it as the discovery process continues. But this case is on a rocket docket, both cases headed to trial soon. So that's a pretty big piece of evidence, right? A memo from the former top prosecutor at the federal prosecutor's office in the Eastern District of Virginia saying, we, the prosecutors, have evaluated this case, and we find that there's not sufficient evidence or probable cause to pursue this case. We're not able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. We hereby decline. You don't really see that produced in criminal cases all that often that are then filed. So that was a big moment. There was another moment during this hearing where the federal judge, Judge Curry, said, you know what, I've had the opportunity now to review the grand jury transcript in camera, meaning that it's not going to be released publicly, but she described what was missing. And she said, what I found missing was a key portion of the grand jury proceedings from about 4:50 p.m. Eastern time on until the indictment was secured. Counsel, prosecutor, Halligan. It wasn't Halligan, it was a lawyer by the name of Whitaker from the prosecutor's office. But can you tell us what happened with that transcript? Why isn't it here? To which the DOJ and the prosecutors said, well, the court reporter wasn't typing during that period, or the court reporter just wasn't doing the work then. The court reporter wasn't doing the work, wasn't typing? What are we talking about? These are pretty serious proceedings. What do you mean the court reporter wasn't? That's why you're saying it's missing. That's not supposed to happen. The court reporter is supposed to take down all this stuff, especially the instructions leading to the charges. Like, how do we know that they weren't given incorrect legal instructions? So that was something that we found out was missing. And then the judge said, I also find it very suspicious that Attorney General Pam Bondi purported to do some sort of letter to me saying that she retroactively blesses the prosecution. So even if you have Lindsey Halligan is determined to be unlawfully appointed, that it's now adopted by the DOJ. And in this letter, Attorney General Pam Bondi says that she's reviewed the transcript, but the DOJ didn't have the transcript at that time, as we've evidenced. First off, a major portion is missing. So how can Attorney General Pam Bondi said she reviewed the whole proceedings like she put in a declaration or she put in a memo to the court? She couldn't have read it. And then also the DOJ claimed that it had to retrieve additional documents last week from the court reporter. Again, there was still a missing portion. And that was after Pam Bondi claimed that she had it. So in other words, the judge is basically calling Pam Bondi a liar. Didn't use that specific language, but basically said that To which Pam Bondi later did her rounds on state regime media known as Fox. These hyper-partisan judges, these hyper-partisan. The grand jury key portion is freaking missing. What are we talking about? So it seemed, by all accounts, that this was a terrible hearing for Lindsey Halligan. It seems that the judge is going to disqualify her. But as you may have seen in the reporting that I've done with Harry Litman, it seemed that the judge was actually a few steps ahead of that and was looking not just at the disqualification, but the totality of the unethical behavior. Here, to break that down, is Harry Litman from the Talking Feds YouTube channel and the Talking Feds podcast. Harry, there's a first for a lot of things in this Trump regime when you go through all this. The first time I've ever heard of an insurance lawyer who's never been a prosecutor, become the top federal prosecutor, be in a grand jury alone. The first time there's missing grand jury testimony. The first time an attorney general's retroactively claimed that an unlawfully appointed interim is actually that. So how do you break this down, Harry?
Man, oh man, this is the Keystone Cops operation of all Keystone Cops operations. You have, of course, prosecutors alleged to cut corners, be imperfect in different ways. Let's start with the court reporter. There is no such thing. I mean, no such thing as any kind of proceeding without a court reporter being there. You know this, Ben, for anything. It's absolutely true in the grand jury, where the Rule 6 that we're familiar with, as stating the ironclad requirement, you can't reveal information from there. Guess what else it says? There shall be a court reporter to record. And you know this from trials, you know this from grand jury. The court reporter, you know, is a sort of a figure that you're not paying much attention to unless and until he or she says, I didn't get that sentence. I've got a little sore throat. I have to use the restroom. I'm out of paper. Everything. I mean, everything stops. So there's two possibilities here. One is, and it seems most likely to me, that the reporter took everything down as is required, as any prosecutor would know. And you already mentioned that they whiffed previously when Judge Curry said, give me all the stuff, and they did, except for everything that Halligan said. And they had to, and she had to say, Judge Curry, I wasn't kidding, give it to me again. Then it shows up with this gap from 440, which, by the way, the judge was being pretty, cautious in open court about how to describe how much of it, was there, how important it was. You don't have to go into details. It's missing. It's missing. And the only other possibility any prosecutor can even think of, and I've spoken to others, is, did the court reporter, say, okay, if I leave me? And Halligan, not knowing anything, not knowing where the front door or water fountain is in the grand jury room, because she's never been there, say, oh yeah, that's okay. And then find out later. If that were so, it would be, a complete debacle. And as you say, and as Judge Curry said, here we have Pam Bondi having done this, official looking proclamation on DOJ Attorney General stationery saying, I've reviewed the grand jury transcript and she's okay. Got to be either a lie or there's something, some huge thing missing that's being hidden from the court, not to mention the rest of us. By the way, Lindsey Halligan was there hearing all this, and they purposely kept her from making an appearance because she would have fielded all these questions, whether she's a lawyer or a witness, from the judge, and she'd have been, tongue-tied, to say the least. But what Curry is hinting at, remember, the whole point of this proclamation is to give an alternative, like belt and suspender. The belt doesn't work because on the day of the indictment, Lindsey Halligan, and I think you're right that Curry's going to go this way, all other courts have, she was not the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, whatever Pam Bondi might have said. And so that was signed by someone. It could have been, Ben Meiselas or Ben Perry. and very estimable fellows, but not the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia. But their backup is, oh, well, I looked at it and she's okay. As the lawyers as Abby Powell said at the time, look, if you're relying on that, you're as much as saying it wasn't good back then. And that's what matters when the indictment was returned. But even if you are now, I think you will see an opinion. And she said to Judge Curry, we'd have it by Thanksgiving, that's going to say, as to this second proclamation, and second grounds for endorsing Halligan, it doesn't work for 8 reasons. And by the way, she won't have to say Bondi's lying. So she'll say, there's no way she could have done this full review because this stuff is missing. And apparently the dog ate it or whatever it is for the DOJ. So it really harms them legally. But the big thing is, this isn't like, they left their briefcases out. The court reporter's not, you have to order up a transcript, true. But the court reporter takes down everything. I mean, everything, unless it's expressly off the record. That's the other remote possibility. She actually said flagrantly improperly and against Rule 6, let's just not type this out now, Ms. Court Reporter. That itself would be, grounds for bar discipline, not to mention Inspector General discipline, not to mention not ever having been appointed as the U.S. Attorney. So she was sitting there, had a very, very embarrassing day. And I think it's going to get worse. I think her deficiencies are going to show up in this opinion. And one day, I think we're going to see that transcript, especially if the case is dismissed. And just think about it, Ben. She goes in not knowing which way is up and having to come out with the heads of James Comey and Tish James on a platter, because that's what Trump wants. You can only imagine what sort of overreaching or ignorant, unlawful steps she took in that grand jury. We don't even know that yet, but it's been such complete romper room from at this point. And I don't mean like sort of a little cutting corners. I mean, are you friggin' kidding me? No reporter. Curry played it kind of cool, but I think the opinion that she writes will be kind of hot.
Yeah, it seemed that she was entertaining the response just to make sure that all I's were dotted, T's are crossed. My question for you, we see this sometimes in jury trials, where after the jury trial is completed and there's questions of jury misconduct, a juror may be called in, investigations, motions for new trials. We don't really see this with the grand jury ever because, the process, first off, it's secret. Second off, the prosecutors know what they're doing and they're trained and you go through the process. There's usually not granted this idea of grand jury misconduct in a way so egregious is not usually something that is a viable path. Not to say it never happens, but it's just not, it's very, very rare. What we're talking about here, never has happened, ever, in any prosecution. Yeah. So let me be clear about that. So at some point though, is there a process where the judge with subpoena power can one by one call some of these grand jurors back in, whether it's in camera or whatever, and say, what did she tell you about what happened here? Or can the magistrate do that? How would you, it seems unfair to me that because there's a missing transcript that we don't get to know. What if she said, okay, everybody, by signing this, you're just saying that you were present today.
Yeah, exactly.
How do we know?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The short answer is it's super hard to do, in part because there are 23 members. But in this case, I think we know already that it was a razor thin margin. Look, a judge can certainly do it. The judge supervises the grand jury, but before they would, I think they would just say to the prosecution, which after all has the burden, you could say, of showing these are bona fide charges. If you can't show me that it was all legit, I'm dismissing this. Better do it, next time, because at a minimum, talk about a sort of Rashomon mess of this grand juror says this one says that, and it's a little bit. I'm sure it would draw immediate objections and appeals because the judge shouldn't. It's such an arm of the prosecution of the executive branch and the like. Now, you do see this happen, including when allegations of prosecutorial misconduct. So I'm not saying it's, there's theoretical ways that you can violate the due process clause in the grand jury, and God knows she might have done it. But I think the way it would be framed is, you're making all these mistakes. By the way, you weren't validly appointed in any way, case dismissed. And even if you were, because this is maybe going to go up on appeal, et cetera, here's 16 other reasons why case is dismissed. I think that's what we'd more likely see.
Right. And so people know, though, if this prosecution was handled the right way with legitimate probable cause and timely brought, not on the last day of the statute of limitations, if the judge ultimately made a ruling like this, what would normally happen if you just disqualified, I just want everybody to know this, like the top United States attorney, usually there would be other people who signed the document. So if you knock off one person, there's still somebody else who validly signed it. Because Halligan's the only signature, there's no one else who signed this. You can't retroactively go back to the statute of limitations. That defeats the whole purpose, I suppose, unless you're the United States Senate and you're making claims for yourself. You could retroactively allow yourself to sue Special Counsel Jack Smith's DOJ, which is just the taxpayers, but that's a whole other rant right there. But also, Harry, if this was brought well within the time limitations and the case got dismissed, what can you do? You just refile it.
That's what's going to happen with Tish James. Tish James isn't saying dismiss it permanently. Comey is. But I just want to follow up on the point you just made, because what it really shows is part and parcel of what's going on here. It's, Trump wants it. It's the U.S. attorney, the professional Republican nominee by Trump, says, you don't have a case, Mr. President. So he's fired. You bring in this complete rookie. So in other words, these obvious and in many ways unprecedented deficiencies that you're pointing out go with the territory of the reprisal prosecution, get Comey for at any cost kind of mindset that has, brought us here in the first place.
There you have it. Harry Litman, Talking Feds YouTube channel. Everybody subscribe to the Talking Feds YouTube channel. It's where I get my legal news from. You should too. While you're at it, you can subscribe to the Talking Feds podcast and the Talking Feds Substack. But for sure, the Talking Feds YouTube channel. Subscribe now. Thanks so much, Harry.
Hey, thanks, Ben.
Everybody hit subscribe. Let's get to 6 million subscribers.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.